So in your sculpture, let's say in your sculptural works or display works, you always work in series. Let's say until now, might change, but why? Do you have an explanation for this? Why? What is the serious aspect? Why is this so important to you?
Yeah, I think when I first started working, I didn't work in series. I worked mostly in, let's say, individual units. And I think the series in a way is the same. It's also an individual unit, but the parts are quite large. It's like sometimes you feel that you can express something with a sentence, and sometimes you need a paragraph, and sometimes you need the whole essay. Yeah. So I think the size and the number of elements that are included in each work have to do with this, with what does the work require. Recently in these, it has become, let's say in recent years, or that's not so recent, in the last 10 years, series has been much more generative for me in order to be able to handle the topics I was thinking about. So with heritage studies, it was clear that it couldn't just be a single work. Same with lexicon, same with surrogates with a new series, or proxies with a life of their own. But sometimes the series is quite large, sometimes it's quite small. So it's with heritage studies, it's quite a large series. But like with proxies with a life of their own, I think it will end up being quite a small series. So yeah.
And when we look at the series that we are showing here now, lexicon is started, is the earliest of them. So I think it started in 2012. You start with an artwork, and with the title of this artwork, or a word which is appearing in this title, which you claim to be very relevant for today, or also you see a necessity for reflecting on it in the new circumstances. So it's somehow the starting point is a linguistic one, and then you find a form which is a proposition again, how we could discuss this. And then in heritage studies, as you described, you start from an historical artifact. This is a series which started some years later, so it overlapped also with lexicon. But then I have the feeling you really start from this object, and you are reproposing it or remaking it. So what is this, the relationship between the heritage studies and the lexicon? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so I think lexicon and heritage studies, even though they might appear to be, the form might appear to be similar, in my mind they're quite distinct, and also the approach is distinct, but what they're dealing with is distinct. So lexicon actually started from another work which is included in this exhibition, which is The Revolutionary, which I made in 2010.
He was described as an intruder, always jumping from house to house, muddling in his neighbor's business. Those who knew him later in life would have a hard time believing that the soft-spoken, quiet and antisocial man they came to love
also came from another work where I was working on monuments and trying to find the language to describe them. And I'm very, let's say, I wasn't trying, I'm actually, in descriptions was very careful with the terms used. And one of the terms which kept popping up was revolutionary, because it does pop up when you're dealing with monuments, but at the same time I couldn't use it. And one of the reasons I couldn't use it is because I didn't feel I had a good sense of what it meant, or what it, let's say, pointed to or signified. And this became a bit strange for me, that and so the work, The Revolutionary, was made in an attempt to try and figure out what this term meant. So I wrote a fictional story, and I generated it using text-to-speech, and I composed the whole thing into an audio work that also has a display as part of it. But this, relying on, let's say, an artwork or a fictional story to find out what a term signified or could signify or could mean was what allowed lexicon to be born. So it was this idea that, you know, let's say if I tell you to describe to me a street market, and then you go and you take your camera and you set it up and you shoot a street market and we end up with a photograph. But perhaps for me it doesn't signify what a street market is. Perhaps it includes other things like information about tradition or poverty or things I don't necessarily associate with a street market. So I try to do something different. I try to go back and, you know, flip my camera upside down or even show a picture of something completely different. And I feel in art you can do this. You can show someone a picture of a chair and you can call it a table and they will entertain the possibility. So I thought, so that's the space where you can actually interrogate this, let's say, gap between, or not necessarily gap, I don't, this is not the best way to describe it, but a way to manifest the language conceptually and materially. And so I started to look at artworks which weren't my artworks, but artworks by other artists that existed, and they had a descriptive relationship to their title. So it was always the title, actually, to go back to your question. And the work itself had this descriptive relationship to the title. If I thought the work did this job of manifesting the title materially and conceptually in a way I recognized, then great. If not, then I attempted my own, let's say, historical in the sense of like a contemporary, I mean like in the now manifestation of the term. And this manifestation took the form of both, let's say, an artwork which tried to manifest this term alongside the description of the original work. So let's say the remake is both together. So and the year always made it there. So the year of the original work made it in the description, but also the year in which I attempted my, let's say, new manifestation was also there. So you have like lexicon, laboring study for 2012, or fortune teller study for 2013.
So that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
3 months after Nayyirah testified, President George H.W. Bush launched the invasion of Iraq. But it turned out Nayyirah's claims weren't true. No human rights group or news outlet could confirm what she said. It also turned out Nayyirah was not just any Kuwaiti teenager. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, Saad Nasir al-Sabah. She had been coached by the public relations firm Hill & Knowlton, which was working for the Kuwaiti government. We're joined now by the journalist who first revealed Nayyirah's identity, Rick MacArthur, the president and publisher of...
And then this, I think the interesting aspect is that in art spaces, so we are very aware, more or less aware that we are able of labeling something as something, and then we read it like this, we learned this. But I think we still think a caption is, we don't think so much of the language, so the goal is most of the time to make it readable, understandable, but it has this explanatory dimension, and this is not really questions so much. So you brought a linguistic discussion, which on the field of linguistics, or I mean post-structuralism, it's very important, but maybe not so much discussed in the texts that art spaces produce. They would always say it about the artworks, but not about their own text.
Yeah, I think this is a good point, because that's why I kind of corrected myself when I used the term gap, because there is one way where you can understand the work where there is this correct way to describe this term, and this is kind of critiquing how the term is used, and that's not, I don't believe that language could be separated from life like this. Actually, I think it's it's part and parcel, and you can do this. So it's not this gap that I'm thinking, but actually trying to manifest this language, and the manifest this language can also be through words and can be through form. So in a way, even though they're different, let's say if I use an image, or if I use a photograph, or if I use a sculptural object, or if I use a text, I know they're structurally very different, but at the same time I use them in very similar way, which is the domain of language, all of them, even